Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And on our panel here tonight, the Conservative Cabinet Minister in charge of International Development, Priti Patel. Labour's Shadow Education Secretary, Angela Rayner. The Liberal Democrats' former Business Secretary, Vince Cable. The joint leader of the Green Party, Jonathan Bartley. And the journalist and Margaret Thatcher's authorised biographer, Charles Moore. Thank you very much, and remember, if you want to get stuck in at home into these arguments, Twitter's at your disposal, Facebook, our hashtag is BBCQT, you can search for BBC Question Time, you can text us if you prefer to do that, 83981 is the number, push the red button to see what others are saying. Let's have our first question, which comes from Jason Dyer, please. Jason Dyer.
Thank you, David. I would like to know, ask the panel, after paying taxes all your working life, do you think it is fair that you have to sell your family home to pay for the care?
Is it fair you have to sell your family home to pay for your care costs in the manifesto today? Priti Patel, is it fair?
Well, it's not fair, and that's not what we are proposing. We are very clear in terms of the fact that we need to take some decisions now, long-term decisions, about how we look to the future and address the ageing population and the needs of social care. And so what we are saying is that we will put in place now this ability and this safeguard of £100,000 so people can still keep their house. They don't have to sell their house, but they are protected now in terms of their long-term care costs, and that applies to people that are having residential care, so in care homes, as well as those that now have care at home as well, whereas previously the focus was only on those that went into care home settings.
Isn't it what you used to call the death tax when Labour suggested something very like it?
I think Labour were proposing something totally different, which was a tax on all assets, property, carte blanche, and so we've been clear about having this £100,000 level, which makes it very clear that people don't have to sell their homes, they can stay in their homes and they can keep their properties.
But their children have to sell them.
Well, there is obviously a position afterwards in terms of whether or not it's family members, effectively.
Okay. Vince Cable.
Well, Priti's completely wrong. I mean, there is no cap on the amount of money that you have to pay. If you contract one of these degenerative diseases, dementia or some other complicated matter that involves very, very large expenditure on social care, there is no limit to what you have to pay. There's a crucial difference between what this government is proposing and what we agreed under the coalition. We said under the coalition that there should be a cap of £75,000. We agreed it was in the legislation and the government have pulled it. And what happens now, it's a lottery. I mean, if you grow old without ill health problems and then perhaps die quickly, there aren't big social care bills. If you're one of those unfortunate people that have these degenerative conditions over a long period of time, you have massive social care bills, it's surely fair that society should protect you. And that's why we talked about having a cap to the amount of social care payments. Under the government's proposal, that is withdrawn. It is a wicked lottery. And there's a lot of hypocrisy in this, because the last year or so, the Tories introduced, they cut inheritance tax, supposedly to help people pass on property to their children. But what will now happen is that if you're one of those unfortunate people who's got unlimited care costs, you'll be paying 100% inheritance tax. All of your family savings will disappear. It is a lottery, it is grossly unfair, and it's a big step backward from where we were a few years ago.
Charles Moore.
Well, I'm not sure if the government's proposal is necessarily right, but I actually do think that it's not wrong to have to use your house to help fund your care. And this is particularly true if you're reasonably well off, which obviously a large number of, though by no means all, house owners are. I don't understand why your house has to be treated in a completely separate way from any other possession. It does say, I noticed in the Conservative manifesto, it says, one purpose of long-term saving is to cover needs in old age. That is a fair point. It is. And we all ought to think about that. And that is an important thing you have to work out. So I don't really see... You see, if you don't follow that rule, then what happens is that the government is paying out huge care bills to people who actually have quite a lot of money. Because they have these houses. The house might... You know, many people nowadays have a house worth £400,000, that sort of thing. And if that's totally protected and the government has to subsidise them, then that subsidy that's harder to find for people who actually really need it. And I notice one thing the Tories are trying to do in all of this, not just about care, they're trying to focus all type of social help on where need is. So they're trying to get rid of this idea that everybody can get need. Now, this is going to annoy a lot of Tory voters because, as a matter of fact, because you know, a lot of Tory voters are quite used to being quite well off and getting quite a lot of government money for one thing and another. And what Mrs May is doing, because she's talking about the just about managing people, is she's trying to focus on them who were historically considered more perhaps Labour voters, and she's thinking they actually are going to really need care much more than a lot of the people who get it automatically. So that's the thinking, and I think it's, as a broad point, it's reasonable.
Angela Rayner.
Well, it's clear to me that the Conservatives have replaced the triple lock with a triple whammy for pensioners, if I'm quite honest. The winter fuel allowance, the issue around pension cuts, and now this issue around what we're dubbing the dementia tax. And I'm pretty cross about this. I'm cross about it because before, what led me into Parliament was being a home help and looking after people in their own homes. And they were told, do the right thing all your life. Work hard. They bought their homes in good faith. They saved in their pensions in good faith. And they're having it stolen away from them, whether it's the women born in the 1950s, the WASPy women having their pensions stolen. Now they're saying they're going to take your assets as well in your home. It doesn't have to be like that. It's a disgrace. And it's the actual deprived areas, Charles, that are facing the most significant cuts through council cuts. In my constituency of Ashton-under-Lyne, Oldham and Tameside councillors, half of their budgets cut under the Conservatives, which has affected those very same people they're saying they're trying to help. It's vicious, it's nasty, and it's not the way to run our services.
Right, I think the point is here, though, we are protecting people's assets. It is right that people save. You know, we are a country that saves and has worked hard, and people do save and they accumulate their assets. But we are protecting people's assets up to £100,000.
You wait until they die and then you're going to snatch it from them.
So what's Labour's solution then? Because we are taking a long-term approach to social care provision. It is not sustainable, Angela.
You are
carry on in the way in which we are doing so right now.
You are cutting taxes to the rich. You have cut corporation tax to 17%. You've cut
and that
capital
helps to grow
gains
the economy
tax.
and grow jobs.
No, it doesn't.
I think you'll find it does.
It doesn't. Margaret Thatcher's level was at 33%. We're at 17%. We can pay for our elder relatives. We don't need to be this way.
I'll just pick up on one little. Thank you. You said you listed, among other things, the winter fuel payment being abolished. That was in your manifesto in 2015 for the better off, wasn't it?
Well, if you look at our manifesto that we've put forward, which is a transformation.
In 2015, when you were elected, it said we will stop paying winter fuel payments to the richest.
But I'm talking about our manifesto that we're standing on today. And actually,
so you've given that up?
Well, we're looking at our manifesto now. If you look at the Conservatives' manifesto, they're cutting all of their promises to older people of this country. Whereas our manifesto says we will look after everybody. It's about a choice of what sort of society do you want to live in? Do you want to live in one where they attack the poor, the disabled, the pensioners, or do you want one where they cut corporation tax to the rich?
All public money goes to people that actually need this. And that is the purpose of why we're making the changes to winter fuel payments.
There's no real point in a system, Angela, in which David Dimbleby and Vince Cable, to mention two people who are slightly getting on in years, can get the winter fuel allowance. No. Why should they?
Charles,
I mean, it's just ridiculous waste of public money.
But when you mean
Angela, I'm going to stop you because you've said
they're asking me, and I'm saying that when you mean testing, you don't make any savings.
I'll come back to you. Jonathan Bartley.
I want to answer your question, Jason. Let's back up a little bit. When the NHS was set up, and NHS is very close to social care, they have knock-on effects on one another. It was set up with the principle that we don't know what the future is going to hold, and therefore, collectively, as a society, we will make provision to make sure that if someone does need 10 years social care, if they do need a major operation, or if they're indeed healthy and lucky enough to have a very long life of health, they should all have the security. And that should be funded by all of us, not singling out individuals and breaking that social contract between us. Now, the Conservatives are breaking that social contract. They are piling pressure on individuals. And I think we need to also be clear about what the context is. This is not coming about because we suddenly have an ageing population. This social care crisis is because we've had chronic cuts and underfunding at the local authority level. 37% cuts to local authority, a £4.6 billion deficit in social care. And that is why we are now getting that move.
Where would you get the money from?
Well, I'll tell you what.
I mean, everybody agrees that there's been cutbacks.
We could just go back to to reverse what the Conservatives have done since 2010, because we have £122 billion not going into the public purse because of cuts to corporation tax, because of giving tax breaks to the richest 50%.
All right, let me hear from some members of the audience. The man in the pink shirt there, then I'll come to you over there. Yes, sir.
Hello. I think people may be inclined to agree and accept the rise to £100,000 if the social care was adequate, and it isn't. My father's been ill for 11 years, been bedridden for 4. The social care gets carers coming in. He's had to change them 7 times in the last 2 years because the standards are very low, the staff are turned over, they're unprofessional, he's left in squalor, and they can't save and maintain their own house because they're spending all the bills on the care, and he's worked all his life.
And he's paying, sorry to get it right, he's paying for the care, but you don't think the care isn't good enough?
Because he's got a Parkinson-type syndrome, he's not entitled to have the care paid. If he had cancer, he'd be fully entitled to have his care paid for.
But are you saying that the actual quality of care he gets, which he's paying for, is not adequate?
It's not up to standard. I'm a nurse myself.
You're a nurse?
And that's how I judge and...
What happened, David?
And the woman there.
I work in the Millennium Library here in Norwich, which is the busiest and very good library in Britain, and we see what the cuts have done every day to the people that are coming into the library, and I feel very strong. I think Angela's absolutely right. The cuts, we've absolutely been cut to the bone. And now Theresa May is attacking the pensions. The pensions actually started at, what was it, 1909? The first pension came out, 7 and 6. People talk about Corbyn's Britain going back to the 1970s. Well, what about the Tories going back to, like, the 1870s?
Okay.
It's becoming Victorian what's happening in this country.
The man in the blue shirt, yes, you say.
What I struggle with at the moment is there seems to be an easy win. We all recognise that the NHS, police and everybody need more money. Why hasn't any of the political parties committed to reducing the overseas aid budget, which is about 12 billion a year, even if it's just for a short time? Let's cut that back and let's reinstate it when we've balanced the budget.
We may come to that question in a moment. The woman here on the right.
To expand on that point, to autocratically give 0.7% of our GDP, and it's a target. There's no focus on where it's being spent.
All right, I'll come to that right now. Let's just hold it for a moment. Just stick on the point we were on before. You in the third row, yes. Yep.
I want to ask Angela. You talk about how people are encouraged to work hard and save all their lives. Yet there seems to be hypocrisy amongst the Labour Party. A bit like how you're against grammar schools and yet most of the shadow cabinet sends their children to selective or private schools. You just, whilst you may say, oh, you're just going to take away everyone's savings, you instead would take it away in inheritance tax. Surely this is complete hypocrisy and you just want to soak the rich.
Well, no, it's not hypocrisy, it's about choices, and what we're saying is this government have made choices where they've slashed corporation tax, slashed the tax for those that are rich, and then they're making pensioners pay for it. Now, I went to a state school, and all my children go to a state school. I want the best for every single child, and that's why I don't believe that grammars are the right thing to do. I'm basing it on the evidence rather than hypocrisy.
Okay, come to you, yes.
There's a fundamental point here, and this isn't just about education. This is actually about Labour and the fact that they literally think that they can spend their way when it comes to any big challenge or any big problem that society faces by taxing people. So, you know, if you own it, they'd tax it. You know, if you consume it, they'd tax it. If it walked, there's no doubt about it that they'd tax it. But at the same time, well, it is true.
Are you ruling out national insurance contribution rises for the British people? Are you going to rule that out in your manifesto? We did.
Has no credibility when it comes to the
you don't answer the questions,
situation.
Well, you've read the manifesto.
And there's nothing in the manifesto that says you will not increase national insurance contribution.
You know, the choice
that's what you wanted to do in the last Parliament. Are you going to do that?
June the 8th is about economic credibility
you won't
and the
answer that
leadership
question.
of
You
our
had
country.
16.
And 7 years ago, Conservatives in government had to pick up the pieces of the
There is a commitment.
No, it was a global economic crisis and the deficit has increased. You promised that you'd get rid of the deficit, and now you've said it'll be 2026.
Listen, this is. I'm sorry, there are 5 people on the panel. This is getting ridiculous. You cannot just shout at each other across me and leave out everybody else. It's absurd.
Can I just say, in this conversation, you are both talking about taxation, but in a different way. You are talking about taxing people for dementia.
You, sir, in the centre.
We know where the money is. We've got to go and get it, and it decides where it's going to fall.
You in the middle there. No, not you. The man behind you. Yes. Yes. You. Yes.
Every time there's a cut mentioned or a saving needs to be made, Labour seem to be against it. Can Labour please tell us how we reduce 1.7 trillion of debt?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, that's a really fair point, because under the Conservatives, debt has doubled. And they promised... and this is why I get really passionate about it, because they promised that they would make sure the deficit was already gone by now. It's not true.
What's your answer to him?
My answer to you is that where we said we would borrow, it's about capital investment. It's about borrowing and investing in our young people and our British lives.
Okay.
So instead of getting people off the peg from abroad to do the skills in our country, it's about making sure that our young people have a national education service, so they're invested in without the debt.
All right. Don't overdo it. Vince Cable, how would you answer his point? How is the debt going to be paid off, which has increased under the Conservatives?
Well, if we're going to have improved services while dealing with sensible public finance and public debt, as you rightly say, we've got to have an honest way of funding these things. That's why we've addressed the issue about the lack of funding for social care and health by saying, you know, we've all earners, we've got to pay a penny in the pound more on income tax. That doesn't solve the problem, but it's substantially alleviated. But saying you can never cut anything and that you've got to have tax cuts the whole time is fundamentally dishonest. Because if we have good public services, we've got to pay for them. Not just a handful of billionaires, but we've all got to make a contribution. And there was nothing in the Conservative manifesto today to explain how public finance is going to be raised.
Where would you suggest we make our cuts? We have to make cuts somewhere, you agree.
Well, I can assure you,
cut?
I was in the coalition for 5 years. I ran a tough budget. I had to cut my department spending by 25%.
Did you agree in that?
I did it because we had to get the budget in order. And,
so you agree that we need to cut some services somewhere?
We have to manage the public finances properly, of course. But what is missing from this national debate at the moment, and particularly from the Tory manifesto, is where are they going to raise taxes? We know that after the election, when Theresa May gets in with a big majority, taxes are going to go up, probably in income tax, probably national insurance. White Van Man is going to have to pay more. There isn't a word about it in their manifesto.
Priti Patel, just answer.
Well, we've always said...
Let me put it this way round. Would you like to state that there will be no increases in tax and no increases in national insurance? Well, or are those words that Mrs May would not allow you to speak?
All decisions on tax and spend are set out, and rightly so, Vince will know this and other panellists will know this, in the rightful way, which is through budgets and fiscal events. That is not for me as a panellist to come on and start speculating about. No, maybe in your manifesto, Angela, where, of course, you know, it's all about corporation tax solving all the social problems that there are. But actually, this is about being credible on the economy,
well, you're not credible,
making sure, I think you'll find we are, when it comes to financial credibility. Labour have a £58 billion black hole in their own finances from their manifesto.
You, sir, over there.
We are committed to the financial position that we'll be taking.
I haven't had a chance to read the Tory manifesto because it only came out today. But the winter fuel allowance, how exactly are you going to implement who has it and who doesn't? Because other governments have resisted doing it because they said it was too complex.
We've said that it'll be means tested. Currently there are 12.2 million people that have the winter fuel allowance, the actual payment itself, at great cost, so it will be means tested.
OK, just before we move away to another question, Charles Moore, I introduced you as Mrs Thatcher's biographer, and I note that the Spectator magazine you write for today says that this is the most left-wing leader of the Tory party in 40 years. Are there things in this Tory manifesto and Theresa May's approach to politics which, in your mind, are completely different, a new direction for the Conservative Party, or is that just people
in one way not, because I think Mrs May is very much expressing the sort of idea of the nation's identity asserting itself in the way that Mrs Thatcher was that's what Brexit is all about, and that's very much a Thatcher thing. And also she's going for, if you like, the lower middle class, what she calls the just about managing, which were then called the C2s, rather than natural permanent Tory voters. That's very similar, but there is a big difference. And the big difference is that Mrs Thatcher was much more of a preacher of liberty than Mrs May. And she much more talked about opportunity, and she much more said, trust the people to create wealth. And the thing that the only real thing big thing that worries me about the Tory manifesto is I think it doesn't fasten on that. It doesn't look at the gifts of the people, about how they can do things, how a person can start up a business, and how to create better opportunities so that they can, trusting the people to create the prosperity. There's an element of, I think, too much control in all of this, and it does worry me. Because, you know, particularly if we're Brexiting, we're left to our own devices. We've got to sort it out. And for that, we've got to have a lot of economic freedom.
OK. Last point, you said, then take another question. Up there.
A question for Pretty. If your economics is stable, why is it that you won't volunteer your manifesto to be judged against Labour's, as has been requested?
Well, I don't think Labour's has been judged at all, other than to say that there's a £58 billion black hole, and their commitments are all based on greater tax levels, basically, and more debt and more borrowing. But I think, you know, as I've said, the reality is that when it comes to spending decisions, they will be forthcoming through the fiscal processes that are in place. But I should also make the point, in the manifesto, there are commitments that we've made on education, for example, on housing, you know, finances, money that has been announced effectively during the budget as well. So government has already factored in the spending that will go into those areas. And coming back to the point of social care as well, we have put in an additional £2 billion into social care. And of course, on the point about the winter fuel payments too, that is about making sure, A, it's means tested, but so the rest of that money goes into improving the quality of care, such as the gentleman raised a few minutes ago.
Yes, briefly.
Just come back to the earlier point as well about why they don't want their manifesto costed, and come back to the earlier point, where can cuts be made? It's because there are huge subsidies that could be cut. £6 billion a year is given to buy-to-let landlords, overheating our housing market. There's going to be £110 billion going into Trident nuclear weapons, which we don't need to spend. There is another £40 billion that goes into subsidising the private pension industry that just lines the pockets of financiers in the city. All those things can be cut. We can make the cuts, and you don't want those numbers scrutinised because you know you are subsidising the wrong people in the wrong places.
We'll go on to another question. Just before we do, we're going to be in Belfast next week, and we're in Barnet the week after that. And I say that so that if you want to come, the address is on the screen there and you can. I should also mention the two leaders specials. Well, 4 leaders, in fact, but 2 leaders in pairs. Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn are going to be in York on Friday the 2nd of June. They're not appearing together, they're appearing one after the other. And then Nicola Sturgeon and Tim Farron on the 4th of June in Edinburgh on Sunday. So if you want to come, that's Belfast, Barnet, York, Edinburgh. Rich feasts. you can apply. I'll give the details again at the end. And I think we'll go on to another question. I will come back to the issue, if I have time, about foreign aid. But let's take this question from Emily Petch, please. Emily.
Is Jeremy Corbyn credible enough to lead Brexit negotiations?
I won't take a show of hands, but we'll hear from our panel first. Vince Cable.
Well, I think the simple answer is no. I'm not wanting to get into a sort of general review of Jeremy Corbyn's political history, but, you know, the simple truth of the matter is that on the particular issue of Brexit, he and Theresa May in the same place. I mean, they have both voted for what we call a hard Brexit or an extreme Brexit or a UKIP-type Brexit, which isn't just leaving the European Union, which the public have voted for, but also involves taking it out of the single market, involves taking us out of the customs union, which is fundamental to our manufacturing industries, which will sever a lot of the very close scientific relationships we have. Our university in Norwich here is a typical example of an institution that will be very badly damaged. So that, you know, his responsibility is just as much as the Prime Minister in taking the country in a very damaging and dangerous direction. I mean, I accept, and my party accepts, that the public have voted and the process is being started. But there is a fundamental question now about which type of Brexit we pursue. And I'm afraid that Jeremy Corbyn has lost the plot here and lost the loyalty of a lot of his own people, because he's taking us down the same direction as the UKIP-inspired Conservative government.
All right. The difference between him and Theresa May's negotiating position, if either was in charge?
Well, it's not clear what Jeremy Corbyn's negotiating position is. I mean, beyond the same as the government. I mean, the problem is we now have as a country is that what happens next isn't really in our hands. I mean, the British government's made its pitch. We're pursuing this hard, extreme Brexit option. We've now got to wait for what the European Union countries offer us. They're going to struggle, obviously, to have a common position. There's 27 governments, the European Parliament, and it will probably come in the form of a take-it-or-leave-it offer. And if the offer is a bad one, the question then will be, what do we do as a country? And what my party is saying, quite distinctly from Labour or the Conservatives, is that the public have got to be given the choice of deciding whether we take what is on offer. And that's the context of having another referendum, and I don't think the Labour Party are in that space.
But just while you're on that point, there are two things there. Do you accept that now a majority of people, even if they voted, even including those who voted to remain, now want Brexit and want the government to get on with it? And secondly, it was you, of course, who said that a second vote would be seriously disrespectful,
yes,
and utterly counterproductive.
And
now you've changed your tune.
I said that and I meant it at the time of the referendum. We had the referendum. To disrespect the majority would have been completely wrong. But we now have a different question to answer, which is what happens at the destination. You know, we voted to leave.
But sorry, what were you saying would be counterproductive? An immediate, oh dear, we didn't like the way they went, let's have another one next year.
There was a lot of suspicion, quite rightly, that in some European countries they had referendums, they were lost, the government ran them again. That happened in Ireland.
You thought that might happen?
And that could have happened.
Well, Cameron would stay there and say, let's do it all over again.
If it happened, it would have been wrong, and that's what I was criticising.
Oh, right, okay.
But we're now dealing with a fundamentally different question, which is what happens when we get to the end of the process. I mean, in our view, the government, backed in this case by Jeremy Corbyn, are leading us into a very deep swamp.
Okay.
Okay, it's where we're going. We've got to have some line of retreat if this goes badly wrong.
Angela Rayner.
Well, I think Jeremy Corbyn has been really clear, and the Labour Party position is clear, is that we respect the votes of the referendum, but actually our first principle is to put British jobs and our economy first. Whereas Theresa May is dog whistling for UKIP votes and is saying that we'll put immigration first. Yet she's doubled, she's failed to meet her targets time and time again on immigration. Actually, we want a Brexit deal that will ensure that all parts of the UK can prosper and do well. And our manifesto sets out how how we were going to grow Britain and ensure that our children have the skills for the future and not saddled with lots of debt, and that we build more social housing, and that we build an NHS and a social care system that will give people dignity and respect. The Conservatives are not offering that.
I read pages 28 and 9 of this under immigration for Labour. There's no mention of cutting immigration at all.
We say the freedom of movement would end, and actually what we believe in is by making sure that employers can't undercut the wages in the UK, which the Conservatives have allowed to happen for over 7 years in power. We believe that actually some of the practices that people are feared of around immigration will end because of we will make sure that British skilled workers can get those jobs. We don't have those skills at the moment. They've cut bursaries for our NHS nurses.
Do you want as a policy to see fewer immigrants coming to the UK or not?
We want to see a UK economy that puts our jobs and our workers first. That's what we've said. Now, immigration, and we've made no bones about that, immigration has been positive for the UK, but in some areas, like in my constituency in Ashton-under-Lyne, they feel they've been disproportionately affected by immigration because they've seen the housing pressures, they've seen public services being cut, and they've seen the undercutting of wages. And the Conservatives have allowed that to happen. They've broken their promises on that. And they're going to wreck our economy by dog whistling UKIP on this particular issue.
Thank you, David. Well, the question was about leadership and whether or not Jeremy Corbyn is credible as a leader to go in and get the best deal for Britain when it comes to our Brexit discussions and negotiations. I think the obvious answer is no. I mean, can any of us seriously picture and see Jeremy Corbyn sitting down with presidents and prime ministers and chancellors across Europe to get a deal? And the reason why the answer is no is because we are going to face a challenging time over the next 5 years, and there's only one leader, Theresa May, as Prime Minister, who's been able to recognise that and face up to the fact that...
Where's the 350 million you're talking about?
Hang on a second. We need to get the best deal for our country in those negotiations, which means that we need a strong leader, someone that's going to stand up for Britain, someone who will stand up for our national interests, and someone who will get a good deal for our country, and that is Theresa May. And just another point, on the point about immigration as well, let's be clear about why we have had so many issues over the years on immigration, because it was a Labour Party in government that allowed a policy of uncontrolled immigration, and our objective through our Brexit negotiation will be to take back control of our immigration, to control our immigration policy, and to ensure, well, we're going to do this by leaving the European Union, Angela.
Theresa May was the Home Secretary for 7 years, and she's failed every single one of the targets she's recognised.
Presumably, Angela, you approve of her failure.
I approve.
Because you don't want to control immigration.
I believe that setting targets is the wrong way to go about immigration in this country. Immigrants come to this country and they work and they prop up our national health service.
You're saying the targets are irrelevant anyway.
The target's not the issue. The issue is about people feeling like they've been left behind, that their kids are not getting a future because they're going overseas to get the skilled workers instead of giving our children those chances.
Charles and Jonathan, I'll come to you, but let's hear from some members of our audience here. A lot of hands up. You, sir, over there.
I think if the government truly wants to unite the country and represent the views of everyone, then surely more than one political party leader should be at the negotiation. You can't just have a Conservative-led negotiation. You're only going to have more than half the country disagreeing with it. You need to have representation from every party to truly get a unified Britain.
Okay. And the woman in orange there.
Yes, thank you. The panel seems to be very concerned with immigration and everyone's opinion on it. This county would collapse without not necessarily skilled workers, but workers of all sorts that come in from the East European bloc.
The man behind you, yes, in the third row from that, you.
Can we not forget that Jeremy Corbyn won 2 leadership elections in his own party? Theresa May won by default. So Jeremy Corbyn is in a more stronger, more stable position than Theresa May. Theresa won by default.
Right,
so
Charles,
why should she be in charge of our country negotiating Brexit?
Well, she's got an election coming up. Presumably we'll be able to judge her standing in the country by that. Charles Moore.
In the forward, to the manifestos, but the leaders both write something. And in the first paragraph, Theresa May says, Brexit will define us. And Jeremy Corbyn, in his first paragraph, says, a big part of being the leader of a political party is that you meet people across the country and hear a wide range of views and ideas about the future. Now, it seems to me that one of those sentences is focusing on what it is to be a leader, and the other is not. And I'm afraid it is very clear. I actually covered the 1983 election, and I went round with Margaret Thatcher and with Michael Foot, the then Labour leader, and I saw how they behaved. And Mr. Foot was a dear, kindly man, and I think that's true of Jeremy Corbyn, but it was absolutely blatantly obvious that he couldn't run the country. Completely and utterly so. And it was blatantly obvious that whether you liked Mrs. Thatcher or not, she could. And the voters could completely see that. And a particular point, the questioner put the point there about Jeremy Corbyn being elected. There is such a fantastic difference between being chosen by your party and being chosen by the country. And Michael Foot went to enormous rallies where he was cheered to the echo. You know, I remember in Plymouth, thousands of people cheering and yelling, and he made a brilliant speech. No use, makes no difference. What they have to persuade is the people who are not persuaded. And Mr. Corbyn is an absolute classic preacher to the converted. He can't reach out beyond that, and he won't, and he'll lose.
Coming back to the question again, Emily, this is what the general election is about, in part at least. It is about who has the mandate to go and take forward these negotiations. With regard to your specific question about Jeremy Corbyn, I admire him in many ways. I think he's put forward a bold manifesto, but on his judgment on Article 50, it was not good. You know, if you remember, cast your mind back to 24 hours, 48 hours after the referendum, he urged Article 50 to be invoked immediately. That was an error of judgment. He has given the Conservatives a blank cheque. I guess not just a blank cheque, he's driven them to the bank and got them to cash it in over the Brexit negotiations. But what's the alternative? Theresa May, who's made mistake after mistake after mistake already in the Brexit process, over Gibraltar, over threatening, rattling the sabres around intelligence when she wrote the letter invoking Article 50. She's had to be dragged kicking and screaming after people told her that they wanted to take back control through the referendum, just to let Parliament have a say in it, and eventually conceded a vote in Parliament at the end. But this is a Prime Minister who says one thing and does another, and that's becoming apparently clear. We saw it over the general election. No, there was going to be no general election. A few days later, a general election is called. She swears that she's going to stand up for the marginalised and then freezes welfare benefits. She condemns the evils of child trafficking.
Where's she going to go wrong
in
negotiating Brexit?
And then puts up walls.
Where's she going to go wrong in negotiating Brexit?
I think it's already clear that she's made an error of judgment. I think she isn't keeping her options open. I do agree with Vince on this about a ratification referendum. If she's conceded the principle that Parliament should have a vote on the final terms, then why not trust the British people to have that say as well?
All right. Emily Petch, let me just come back to you. Emily, what do you make of this? What's your view about Jeremy Corbyn and Brexit?
I think that Corbyn is an incredibly passionate leader. You know what you're going to get with Corbyn, whereas May, there's always a bit of ambiguity, I guess. I think personally, I'll be voting for Corbyn because I know what he stands for. He's passionate about his beliefs. I feel like as a student, he cares more about kind of the marginalised in this country.
So when you say, is he credible enough, your answer would be yes?
Yes, definitely.
So it was a kind of rhetorical question.
Yeah, I just want to know what everybody else thought.
Let's go on to another. Now, I tell you what, I said we'd come back to the issue that was raised a moment ago, and it's a question from Gordon Jones. I think we can take that. We won't just take the key issue in it, Gordon, can you?
Thank you, David. The thing what gets me about the Conservative Party at the moment, they're carried on from Cameron's 0.7% of GP, and why?
0.7%, you're talking about foreign aid?
Yes,
yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Foreign aid.
And what was your actual question? Why are they still doing that?
Why are they still carrying on? When you've got shortage of policemen, firemen, the care workers, everybody else, everybody suffers while we keep giving this large amount. And we're giving this large amount away to silly things. We even give Helena, Ireland, 285 million to build an airport what no airlines can take off from.
OK. Charles Moore.
Yes, I basically agree with what was just said. First of all, I think it's very wrong to commit automatically a percentage of the country's money. You shouldn't have a law. All spending should vary depending on need. You shouldn't have a law that says it's got to be X percent. Secondly, it is true, and it's partly because they say it's got to be that much, that they don't know how to spend it. So it's all there, and they don't know how to spend it. And thirdly, they're actually not allowed to spend it on things that are of benefit to Britain. It's actually against the rules. And so it is wasted, and it forbids, you know, one of the key things about running a country is priorities. I've often seen British aid workers in foreign places. Many of them are excellent people, DFID people, I mean government people. But the actual way the system works, I've seen it in Afghanistan, particularly when it's a very dangerous situation, is that all the money that they hand over from British taxpayers goes to the government, and in these bad places it's squandered by the government. The people whose fingers are nearest to the money keep it. That's how it works in those places. And when we actually have priorities, we really, I can't understand why the government's stuck on this one. It's the same with, you know, they go on about energy prices, quite rightly, they're too high, but we have these unbelievably high renewable demands, which are, that's the reason energy prices are so high, is because we spend more than 7 billion a year subsidised out of the levy, making people pay that for alleged climate change. And,
alleged climate change. Sorry, alleged climate change. You're a climate change sceptic or an outright denier?
No, I'm a sceptic.
A sceptic. Yeah. OK. And what evidence is it that you don't believe?
I'm very happy to have the climate change debate, but shall I
finish your point and then I'll bring Jonathan in?
If you're trying to help the people who are just about managing, which I very much support Mrs May in doing, really work that out. Really think about that. And if that's so, you would not be putting up energy bills with renewables levies, and you would not be spending all this money on foreign aid.
But OK. So, Jonathan Bartley, I will come to you. Jonathan Bartley.
Another subsidy we could cut is the £30 billion Hinkley subsidy, which is ridiculous.
Are you in favour of 13 billion foreign aid?
I am absolutely in favour of 13 billion foreign aid, and we would put it up unequivocally and proud of it. I am proud of it, and we would put it up to 1% of GDP. And let me tell you, I am ashamed of our country when we spend 40% of our gross domestic product in public expenditure on ourselves, the 5th biggest economy in the world, and we can just about scrape together 0.7% of GDP on the entire rest of the world, when there's a famine in East Africa with 22 million people facing starvation, and we can't muster up. Where's the pride in our country? Where's the passion about leading the world in doing the right thing? I'm ashamed that we're even having this conversation.
Gordon.
You can shout about it if you know where the money's doing good. They give health ministry in Kenya 106 million to provide health for the next 8 years.
Gordon, I'm absolutely on the same page with you on that. I believe we must know where the money's going. There must be accountability and there must be transparency, but that is not an excuse for cutting the aid budget.
No, you've got to cut it. You've got to cut it.
OK, Gordon, let me come back to the panel. Vince Cable, I'll come to you pretty obviously because you're in charge of all this budget.
I think there are two honest and credible ways of dealing with the aid issue. One is to have the target and meet it. And I have to say, I had many disagreements with David Cameron, but he deserves a lot of credit for having done this. He got a lot of flack from his own people and from the right-wing press, but he stuck at it, and he deserves credit. It seems that the other honest way of dealing with it is the way that you and several other people of the audience have said quite outright, we don't want foreign aid, we want to spend it here. I don't agree with that, but at least it's honest. But what appears in the Conservative manifesto today, something that is grossly dishonest, what they're saying is let's keep the aid target, but fiddle it and redefine it so that it isn't really aid at all. And that, I'm afraid, is going to bring the whole thing into gross disrepute.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they want to change the definition of aid so that it isn't actually aid to developing countries in a way that everybody recognises, but is hiding other forms of British public spending. And that is not reputable. That is not a sensible way of dealing with it. If we have an aid programme and we're committed to it, we should deliver it. And if we want out of it, we should do what other people are saying and cut it. But trying to hide stuff is not...
Well, we're not trying to hide stuff, Vince. So let me be
why
very...
are you trying to redefine
well, let me be very clear about this.
You wanted to abolish the department, didn't you,
We are
yourself?
proud as a government of our 0.7% commitment, and it helps us stand tall in the world. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, and I think actually when we look at the good that we do through international development, no one can doubt we are saving lives and changing lives in unprecedented ways. And I've had the privilege of going to some of the most harrowing places in the world. Jonathan mentioned the East African famine. I've been to South Sudan, I've been to Somalia, where people are dying. And so £20 of UK aid will provide food, water and shelter for a family for over a month. And that helps us stand tall in the world. And we should all be proud of that in terms of how we're spending money. But there is more that we can do in terms of the how we spend that money, where it goes, and following the money to ensure that it goes to the world's poorest to get the development outcomes that, you know, we need to see. We have seen plenty of cases over the years of aid that has not gone to the right causes, the right people, or even driven outcomes and development outcomes or alleviated poverty. And that is my job, through not just our manifesto, but through the 9 months that I've spent in DFID so far, in tracking down, following the money and ensuring that we spend that money so that it's in our national interest, so whether it's on diseases, whether it's on famine, to keep us safe here. And yes, in the manifesto, we do say that we would work with like-minded countries where we can reform the OECD, the DAC rules, for this very purpose, because we can't spend money, for example, on getting military support in to deliver aid in humanitarian situations. And I've seen those situations. I've seen aid workers, or I know of aid workers that have been killed delivering food relief in some very, very unstable parts of the world. We believe that we can change that situation by, yes, spending more with the MOD to get equipment in, but also to get life-saving aid in as well into some very, very difficult parts of the world. And I think actually Britain post-Brexit, this helps us not only stand tall in the world, but it gives us great influence with other countries as well.
There's an interesting thing, because Gordon complains about the shortage of nurses and doctors and all the rest of it. You're spending 13 billion or so, a bit more on foreign aid. The pledge is to increase the NHS by 8 billion over the next Parliament, yes? That's about 30 million a week. You told us there'd be 350 million a week.
Well, we have to, I think,
and you've only managed to get, I mean, you've only managed to get 30, so does that raise a question about whether the foreign aid is justified?
Well, I've already made the case for why we
what
spend
happened
what
to
we
your
do.
promise that we get 350
We've got to leave the
million a
European
week?
Union, first of all, to actually take back control of the money that we do give to Europe.
And we will then get the 350.
You've seen in the manifesto what we will do with that money today as well. We will put that into a fund where that money will go back to the UK, and so that we can spend that money in the UK in a way in which, you know, not only secures jobs in this country, but actually leads to greater investment in this country.
So just before we leave, will the NHS still get the 350 million a week that you stood in front of, brandishing?
£8 billion,
yes,
on top of the 10 billion that's already going into the NHS, on top of the 11 billion that's gone into mental health as well. So in terms of funding for the NHS, we are absolutely committed to not just securing funding, but investing in the future.
So we have to forget the 350 story. Angela Rayner.
Well, you're plugging the holes of the money that you've siphoned out of our public services at best. But to be fair, I will agree with Priti on the issue around the 0.7%. She's absolutely right, and she's changed her tune because she didn't want to get rid of her department, as David did say. But Gordon has a point. He has a point about where we spend that money. And what Priti was saying earlier, for example, we're spending money on giving aid to Yemen, yet we're selling arms to Saudi Arabia, who are causing the crisis in Yemen. So we need to look at that.
Okay. Joanne Reid, let's have it.
Should tuition fees be free for all students?
Should tuition fees be free for all students, which is Labour policy? Angela Rayner.
Yes, I think they should be. Because students pay a massive debt to us by working in our industries once they are skilled and they're being our doctors, our scientists of the future. And our young people are leaving education with £44,000 of debt. That is astronomical. It never used to be like that. It shouldn't be like that, and we've got to end that scourge. And Labour have said quite categorically that we would do that because young people, our young people, are going to be the future of Britain post-Brexit. We'll invest in them.
What was your point?
Yeah.
No, go on.
But if young people are the future of Britain post-Brexit, your VAT would force people out of private schools, the state schools can't cope with it, and it would actually also deny the brightest and the best the bursaries. No, it would deny the brightest and the best, because there'd be less money going in, they couldn't get the education they deserve, and it would make the education in the state sector worse.
OK, I don't think... Can I just say that I don't think it will. I think the bursary, the VAT levy on schools is about schools paying the right amount of VAT, which they currently don't have to pay. It's a state subsidy to private schools. I think when you've got choices to make, I believe that actually putting that money into the 95% rather than the 5% is the right option.
But that's subsidy, not the right option.
I think the perennial question here is, you know, with Labour again, how are they going to pay for this? Because the reality is, when it comes to tuition fees, making it free for everyone is simply not sustainable. It is not financially credible at all. And actually, you'd be supporting, you know, children from pretty well-off backgrounds to go to university. And what we're seeing right now through the tuition fees policy is actually it's giving the support to many of those that could not get access to university education, those from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they're the ones that we should be targeting and supporting to get into university.
But that number's gone down.
The woman in blue there. Woman in blue on the gangway, yes.
I went to university and I ended up with over 30 grand's worth of debt, and I'm not in a job which I graduated for or which I worked hard towards, because of a lot of jobs when you leave university being entry level, so you don't get paid anything or just get your travel costs paid for. So I've ended up in a job that I didn't work hard towards, and I've been there for 6 years because I can't find anything that I've graduated and worked towards.
OK. Vince Cable, of course, the Liberal Democrats famously didn't want tuition fees, and then do you approve of Labour's plan to abolish them again, or are they now inevitable?
I think in an idealised fantasy world where money grew on trees, it should, of course, be free. And all three political parties, including mine, have made complete fools of themselves in the past by promising what they couldn't deliver. When the Labour government came in, they promised never to introduce tuition fees, and did, and promised not to increase them, and did, because they were being sensible and realistic, and Gordon Brown and Tony Blair could see that universities were going bust. They couldn't accommodate the students and provide good quality education, so that's what they did. When we came into the coalition, we'd promised not to increase tuition fees. It was obviously undeliverable. We had to do it. We paid a big political price for it. But the question I had to face, and I was given the hospital pass of this policy, was what do you do? You've got 40% of young people going to university. We want to maintain world-class standards. How do you pay for them, right? You can ask the rest of the public to pay for it in tax. And remember that about 80% of adults never went to university, so why should they pay? You can do what they do in Scotland, which is they pretend it's free, but then they raid the budget of schools and further education colleges to pay for it. Or you can do what we now do, which is to have a kind of graduate tax. That's basically what it is, that people who benefit from higher education, if they get a decent income later in life, they pay progressively according to their income. It's not ideal. I can understand all the anxieties people have about this system, but what is the alternative? How do you pay for it otherwise? This is basic reality.
In the corner, and then I come to you. Yes.
Hopefully this year I'm going to university, and I have friends in my cohort who have not even started the process because they know how much it will cost and they know that they can't afford it. So tuition fees do single out, and it puts a lot of people off. And
Even though it's defined like Vince Cable defines it as a graduate tax, in other words, you only pay it when you start earning.
Yes, because £21,000 is the point where you then start paying. If you earn over £21,000, you then have to pay. A lot of people will earn over £21,000, so they will have to pay it back. But if you pay for tuition fees, if the government does and we don't have to, then the government will know how much they have to spend on tuition fees. At the moment, they don't know. They don't know if 20,000 people are going to not pay, or they will know that they have to pay and not who or who won't pay.
Okay, and you in the front here.
Scotland, obviously they don't pay for tuition fees going to university.
If they're Scottish, the English pay, of course.
But from my understanding, there's a lot less places for people to go to university because that government are paying. So if we had free fees, surely there'd be a lot less places in England for students.
Charles Moore.
This is a very important point that's just been made. Because there are no tuition fees in Scotland for Scots, the serious problem with this is that the universities don't get enough money. This is, the universities themselves mind very much about it. They don't quite like saying it because it sounds as if they're indifferent to the sufferings of students who have to pay the money. But actually, to be world-class universities, they have to get in more money than you can get from government payment. And so what happens in Scotland, and I know this because our son was in a Scottish university and he's English, and he paid the full whack, therefore. But what that means is that the Scottish government, actually Scottish universities rather, want more English students because they get more money. And they want more foreign students because they get more money. And they don't want more Scottish students because they get less money. And so if you think of the ultimate benefit of the education the universities can provide, there have to be higher fees. And that's why it all came about, that it went up to 9,000 when it used to be 3,000 and so on, because otherwise you're just going to get very, very weak university education.
So you're against the universal...
And nobody benefits. I mean, in the end, you're not learning anything.
Jonathan Bartley, we only have a minute left, so...
I have to challenge this idea that there's somehow an inevitability about having to bring in tuition fees, Vince. The only inevitability was that you saw the young people and you thought they are an easy target. That's why you went for them. And you broke your promise. It is the big corporations who benefit from the education that is given to graduates. They're the ones who make the excess profits off this education. It's time they gave back. Now, there is enough money around. There's this lie that there is not enough money. The problem is not there isn't enough money. The problem is the money is in the wrong hands. We've had corporation tax cut and cut and cut since 2010, from 27% down to 19%. If we just reverse those corporation tax cuts, and that's not even up to the EU average level, that's not even up to the G7 average level, we'll still be lower than that, we could produce 9 billion a year, rising to 12 billion a year, which would be enough not just to get rid of tuition fees, but to reintroduce a maintenance grant. That's what I want for my daughter who's about to go to university. I don't want our public sector debt taken away from the public sector and put round the necks of our young people. That is not the future that we need.
Thank you, Jonathan. There are many hands up. I'm sorry, we have to stop because our time's up, as ever.